Thank you so much to Gabby and Aaron for what was truly one of the more interesting rounds that I would not have pulled for those matchups. My name is Mabel Rourke. I am here with Scott Glaza. It is Championship Sunday of the 2023 Vancouver Regional Championships. We skipped forward an hour last night. Good news is we were an hour closer.
That's right, we're almost there. And we skipped forward a little bit too. You know, you thought we were going to a break. Instead, we have a game for you. It's exactly the opposite of what we normally do.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we do get to bring you guys another round 14 because these VGC players flew through their first few rounds of matches today. Truly, you'd think with, Dondozo now making up 25% of the field that there would have been some Dondozo mirrors that would have taken a little bit of time, but we ended up really, truly flying through these matches. And so now we get to bring you guys another round 14, which is a really nice way, I think, to feature a couple of players that, you get to see more in Swiss, and in case, we hadn't gotten to show them, and one of them we haven't actually shown yet on stream, and that is Demitrios. And I think Demitrios is a really cool player, has a lot of cool teams, but he's playing against someone who was on stream yesterday, and Marcus, our Bachelor fan.
Yeah, he's got all Bachelor themed nicknames. We'll have to see if he can earn the final rose into top cut here. One thing to keep in mind is that we know how most of the games this round have gone. I believe the 11-2 versus 10-3 pair down game, the 10-3-1. So I think we know now that no players with 4 losses are going to make it in. So this is an elimination match.
Yeah, this is truly the win and in. It's that final match of the day. These trainers have currently played 13 prior rounds of Pokemon. It's a lot of Pokemon, guys. It is, and they've, they got here pretty early, started, and they're still grinding, and there's still a lot of pressure, but you want that top 8. Top 16 CP still feels pretty nice, but it's not, you're never satisfied.
Yeah, especially when you're this close, right? I mean, I think if you told either of these trainers, before the day, like, hey, the worst you could do is top 16, they'd be pretty happy, but now that they're right on the cusp of, this is just such a crucial game.
Yeah, absolutely right. And for both Marcus, handing over that rose to Demitrios, truly loving the commitment this entire weekend, not only to his gameplay, but to just to the manners, truly, for this.
Yeah, especially he's prepared for day 2. How many roses does this man bring?
He would have had to bring at least 14 for Swiss. He gave 1 to Gabby, so that's 15. And then if he makes it through final, he probably brought 20 roses.
Yeah, hopefully he's allocated for all these interviews. He doesn't want to do too well now, wind up in the lounge too many times. Could run out. It'd be a shame if he didn't have a rose for the finals if he were to get there.
Maybe that's when you instead you bring out the engagement ring, right? Isn't that the end of the show? Either way, though, taking a look at these trainers and their teams, Marcus, who we were able to feature on stream yesterday, running that Dondozo Tatsugiri with Arcanine, Talonflame, Glamora, and Palmont. Palmont really being one of the only Palmonts that we've seen at all kind of this weekend. Demitrios running that team with Talonflame, Fluttermane, Iron Bundle, Great Tusk, Amoonguss, and Tyranitar.
Yeah, so some archetypes we've seen before, a little bit different twist than normal. Marcus, he's got the Franken team of, he's not quite sure if he wants to be Yuki or Cheppa. But obviously it's done very well for him so
Yuki
far.
Crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made that joke yesterday.
Yeah, it's so funny the second time, I think. And then, Demitrios, one thing to keep on with this team, the whole Great Tusk Talonflame team, the Dondozo matchup is typically a little bit awkward. One thing he does have that will make a big difference in this potentially is the Leaf Storm on his Amoonguss. It's somewhat non-common move, especially because a lot of trainers have kind of opted to drop the grass type attack entirely on Amoonguss. Now that Pollen Puff exists, there's a little bit more competition for those moves. Dropping Pollen Puff instead to try to make that Dondozo matchup a little bit better. One thing to keep in mind there is usually with Dondozo, its ability to ignore stat changes is to Dondozo's advantage. In this case, Amoonguss can lower its special attack as much as it wants, and those Leaf Storms will all be acting like Amoonguss is at its base level of special attack.
Yeah, I mean, even that also happens with Great Tusk as well. You don't have those defense and special defense drops with moves like Headlong Rush or Close Combats. You can pretty freely fire those into Dondozo, especially since it's truly the only Pokemon on the other side of the field, and you don't have to worry maybe, and you can maybe save your switch if you have to a little bit later, especially if you feel like you may be somewhat pinned. So it's kind of an interesting way, the way that Unaware works, because sometimes you think it only applies to you, and then you're like, oh wait, I don't actually get the bonus of you getting those special defense and defense drops. But I think for Demitrios too, having the Iron Bundle with the Freeze Dry is probably a Pokemon that I feel like has to come to this match now, especially with the threat of the Dondozo and the Glamora, having something that can outspeed and hit pretty super effectively. The Dondozo is Terra Grass, so having the access to Freeze Dry is probably going to be pretty important.
Yeah, Terrestrialization not going to be a huge swing there. I think another thing to keep in mind, we just saw Aaron's Iron Bundle, which had that Encore in the 3rd slot. This time we have Hydro Pump, so it'll help against that Glamora potentially.
Yeah, Fluttermane and Tyranitar here, though, the lead for Demitrios, whereas on Marcus's side, it is the Glamora and Talonflame.
Yeah, so instead, Tyranitar helping out the Glamora a little bit, providing this Sandstorm.
Yeah, that special defense boost as well onto that Glamora. But, you know, at this point, too, looks like Marcus is trying to value that speed over Demitrios' team, which looks much faster.
Yeah, it's interesting to see here, too. You know, nice about getting Glamora out early. If it is that Dondozo combination in the back, you know, kind of wear down these Pokemon, maybe apply some poison. Dondozo tends to do well in long battles, so, you know, smart.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I think for both of these trainers, you know, if you get that toxic debris up, if Demitrios did not end up bringing the Amoonguss, then it kind of just sticks around for the majority of the game. But Tailwind being the first move clicked here from this Talonflame. Glamora going for Mortal Spin, already trying to get some poison down onto those Pokemon on the opposite side, setting these timers in a way that you don't normally see. Poison wasn't really a status effect that was considered very popular. You know, toxic typically better, but even then, Shadow Ball from the Flutter Mane down into the Glamora, still going to do a good, you know, little bit of damage. Glamora is just so bulky with that Assault Vest. Tyranitar's Rock Slide's enough to get the knockout on Talonflame. Glamora brought down to under half of its HP, and now toxic debris spread on the field.
Yeah, so not a super ideal turn from the side of the field that losing a Pokemon there, but at least, you know, you get some poison down, you get toxic debris down. You don't see all the potential consequences of that turn. You know, if this winds up being a long battle, which is going to be a little bit trickier now, it could still pay dividends. Another thing to keep in mind there is that Tailwind going up. Typically not the biggest thing for a Dondozo team, but you know, kind of keeping in mind here the potential threat of the Iron Bundle. Even with 2 levels of boosted speed, the Tailwind could be a big swing for the Dondozo, making sure it can keep acting first.
Yeah, I think the fact that there is no like Palafin or Haze on the opposite side of the field makes Dondozo a Pokemon that really wants to be on the field, and now that you see it on the field here, we could see in the back Tatsugiri is also hanging out. It is the Droopy form Tatsugiri, which is why you don't see an order up, so it's got Wave Crash and Earthquake, which could also, I think, be some really nice moves as long as, you know, we haven't seen that Talonflame in the back. The Tyranitar is Terra Flying, so it may kind of be holding on to going for a Terrestrialization. Glamora, though, is going to switch out. This is when Dondozo gets to shine. It and its buddy Tatsugiri here going to set up that Commander ability, get that +2 Omni boost, and just try and start getting some big damage down on the opposite side of the field, especially now that if Pokemon on Demitrios' side want to, you know, maybe stop it, you have to switch in and get something poisoned by that toxic debris.
It's sort of an awkward position too, right? Where with the Tailwind you want to go fast, with the Poison you want to go slow, so we'll have to see how he plays this one. He's got some options here to try to clean up this game.
Yeah, Earthquake going to be the move of choice here, targeting down into both of those Pokemon. It's not enough to knock out either of them, actually. They both hang on here and can fire back with attacks. The Shadow Ball from the Flutter Mane into the Dondozo. Man, having those boosts is really, really nice. Crunch, though, targeted into the Tatsugiri, so no damage output there.
Yeah, we will see some damage coming in there. You know, no knockouts yet. It does have to take the damage from that Shadow Ball, but as we see the Sandstorm and the Poison ticking, not looking so good for Flutter Mane.
No, Flutter Mane has at bare minimum 1. You know, actually, no, wait, even with the Poison, right? Things get a little bit tougher, and Flutter Mane is going to get knocked out there, and that's truly one of the upsides of having so many terrain effects and field effects on the field in both Poison and the Spikes and the Sandstorm. You can kind of have a lot of things chipped down, and that Tyranitar really wasn't actually helping out its partner Pokemon Flutter Mane with that extra Poison and with that extra chip down with the Sand as well.
Yeah, it could have been one more turn maybe. And speaking of Poison, you know, the Tyranitar now in a weird spot where, you know, if Dondozo chooses to use Protect, Tyranitar's not looking like it's in such a good spot either, but, you know, there is that Tailwind on Marcus's side of the field, right? You normally you'd be tempted to slow play this one, but now that Iron Bundle's out there, like, you might want to be quicker than it.
Iron Bundle coming in makes me think Amoonguss might not be here, because I feel like that would have been a spot to switch in Amoonguss for free. So now you might be feeling a little bit more comfortable if you're Marcus that you have this opportunity. Even though this bundle is Quark Drive and it's speed boosted, you may have an opportunity to do enough damage, maybe get a knockout early, especially if you can just do enough damage to bring it down to the chip damage of Sandstorm and Poison.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the weird element of his team, right? Where it's like, you know, if it was just Dondozo solo here with how much damage the lead Pokemon took, you'd be thinking, oh, this could be a pretty one-sided match. But, you know, slowly HP whittling away, and Iron Bundle going to choose to take some extra damage here.
Yeah, Iron Bundle just protecting, trying to not take this big Earthquake. That will at least finish off that Tyranitar, and that's going to at least reveal for Demitrios that last Pokemon in the back. Marcus has revealed all of his Pokemon, but I think taking that knockout on the Talonflame seems to be exactly what he wanted early in the game to set up his Dondozo in truly a really nice fashion, where it can just sit here and be so comfortable. The fact that Demitrios' Dondozo answer seems to be a Pokemon that is now starting to get chipped away turn by turn does not feel very safe for the end game, and I think Marcus knows what his lines are, and Demitrios is going to have to make some big plays.
Yeah, he's running out of time here. I mean, we're I believe, the last turn of Tailwind. Iron Bundle really has no choice but to protect there, right? You know, has to limit the amount of swings that Dondozo gets on it with the Tailwind active. So yeah, I mean, slowly getting whittled down. You see the Great Tusk coming out there. You know, typically Great Tusk, a Pokemon that benefits from usually having Focus Sash and getting to survive an extra attack, but Poison would negate that entirely. It really changes the matchup between the more standard version of these teams. In this case, no Focus Sash, Life Orb instead, so maybe that's another little matchup tweak on Demitrios' side of the field.
That's just another 10% chip every single turn that you attack, too. Dondozo going to Terrasilize into that grass typing, definitely something that you want to have in front of maybe something like that Great Tusk if you're trying to not take as much damage. Most importantly, that Iron Bundle, but still would like to click Freeze Dry here. Demitrios also is going to be going for a Terrastalization here. It's going to be onto the Iron Bundle as well. Iron Bundle now Terrastalizing into the Ice type just to get a boosted power on those freeze dries. Maybe with a critical hit here, you could be pretty comfortable to knock out, and that might be your end game.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you need, right? Get rid of this Dondozo, it's a big swing, but Dondozo gets to go first.
Dondozo does still get to move first. This Terra Blast down into that Iron Bundle. It's enough to get the knockout, even with that Terrastalization here, and that means right now that this Dondozo is just absolutely dominant. This is exactly what we expected back in Series A.
Yeah, Dondozo just cleaning up the field here, but we will see that close combat, and it's a critical hit!
A huge critical hit from that close combat onto the Dondozo. Not going to matter about any of those special defense boosts or defense boosts there. Now meaning that you have Glamora and Tatsugiri. This Tatsugiri is Choice Scarf, so it can still get some damage down. Things get really tricky now.
Yeah, it's only a much more interesting game, right? It looked like it was all cleaned up. Still, it's a good spot. Tatsugiri can hit its attacks. It's a smart Pokemon, but apparently not an accurate one. But yeah, the last turn Tailwind, and you do see what Marcus was going for there. Actually, was like super crucial that Talonflame fainted on that first turn. If it had not fainted, Dondozo would never have been able to act before the Iron Bundle, and that critical hit wouldn't have mattered because Dondozo would never have gotten the chance to swing.
Tatsugiri, its move pool is Muddy Water, Draco Meteor, Icy Wind, and Dragon Pulse. Its only fully accurate move is Dragon Pulse. And I don't think that's the move that it really wants to click. If it needs the big damage, it can click Draco Meteor. You still have a lot of damage as well, but output. And Glamora itself, it has Power Gem, Sludge Bomb, Mortal Spin, but it also has Earth Power. Yeah, so speaking of Earth moves, important to keep in mind the Earthquake on Great Tusk's side. We've seen a lot of Great Tusk opting not to know that move. Crucial here because there may not be 2 turns of opportunity for Demitrios, so potentially could knock out both these Pokemon in a single swing. There is a chance, right? Especially if something misses. Tatsugiri does not get the attack down. Great Tusk avoiding taking that damage, gets the Earthquake off this turn. Hitting both of these Pokemon is enough for the double knockout, and Demitrios has found a way to take game 1.
Yeah, wow, what a finish there. It seemed like that game was going to be over, and then, 2 quick and crazy turns, and it is Demitrios going up 1-0 in this set.
That critical hit was absolutely huge, and I'm sure right now Tatsugiri is going to get scolded a little bit for missing that attack, but man, Marcus truly played that so well, and it was just a couple of unfortunate turns.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting going into game 2. Like, for sure, you look at that one, it's like, unlucky, right? Like, it is what it is. But, you're not going to get the same game verbatim in game 2. So both sides have to adjust now. It probably should be 1-0 the other way. And being down in this set makes things very tricky. I think Demitrios' side, you probably have to adjust your game plan a little bit, right? Like, that shouldn't have worked. One thing he has to adjust now. If his main answer to Dondozo is going to be that Iron Bundle, he needs to try to get in a situation where Iron Bundle is out in the field against Dondozo without Tailwind active. That shouldn't have happened in the first game. I guess it didn't. But yeah, you can't rely on a critical hit to win a game.
Yeah, if that means that you leave the Iron Bundle in back for an extra turn and swap in and then swap out for another turn, but then it still doesn't feel like the safest of swaps. The Amoonguss not coming meant that all of your Pokemon were put on timers very early, but do you want to bring in the Amoonguss? Does that even feel like a fully safe bring, especially in the face of a lot of those strong Pokemon on Marcus's side?
Yeah, I think on Demitrios' side too, the assumption probably is like, well, my opponent knows they probably should have won that one, so they may do exactly the same thing. I think it's much more likely that Marcus chooses to run it back, which makes this adjustment a little bit easier for Demitrios, right? Like, I think you can kind of like cheat a little bit toward assuming that you're going to see the same thing. And it's also just the advantage of being up in the set, right? This is an elimination game. There's a ton of stress in both players. Demitrios now has a little bit of comfort where he can guess wrong once. He still gets a game 3 no matter what happens.
Yeah, I think at that point, right, you definitely, you squeaked by on that one. And you have to imagine that Demitrios, there probably is some sort of adjustment that you have to make, knowing, okay, if this game runs back the exact same way, I am not going to get that lucky 2 times in a row. I mean, this building seems to hold a lot of luck factor, a lot of RNG embedded into the floor of this building. But I think for these trainers, you have to still kind of play, you play to your outs, and that's what Demitrios did, and those outs did help him there, but will they help in this game too? And I think for both of the trainers, their leads, hopefully, if you'll see if this Talonflame comes out, maybe there's another answer. Does look like, though, Amoonguss and Tyranitar are the lead for Demitrios, bringing that Amoonguss this turn, and then Marcus bringing the Glamora and Talonflame.
This is sort of interesting to see the Amoonguss in front. It won't be able to be poisoned by this Glamora if it is able to go for that Mortal Spin again, but however, it would need to switch in and out in order to remove any potential toxic debris. So like slightly an awkward position, but I think one interesting thing too is normally you wouldn't want to lead Amoonguss into Talonflame, but in this case, like, do you really care? If Talonflame just attacking the Amoonguss, that might work toward Demitrios' favor anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the Talonflame is actually holding Covert Cloak. It's not holding Sharp Beak, and Sharp Beak, Talonflame, Brave Bird usually is a 2-hit knockout on Citrus Berry Amoonguss, so you don't have to worry about that at this point in the game, and Amoonguss can just protect this turn, just stay a little bit safer as well. Talonflame getting that Tailwind up once again. You are still trying to focus, I think, on that speed control if you're Marcus. Glamora's Mortal Spin will only hit down into that Tyranitar, but it will at least set up a little bit of poison onto that Tyranitar as well, without having to worry about toxic debris getting set up right at this moment. That critical hit did very little damage in comparison to the critical hit we saw
much less critical
in Game 1. Yeah, Tyranitar's Rock Slide, though, into the Glamora once again will set up the toxic debris. Critical hit on the Talonflame. We saw that didn't really matter there, so that's not all too important. Demitrios does have the opportunity now to switch that Amoonguss in and out if they choose to.
Yeah, the game is just memeing at us now with the critical hits, but regardless of the yellow text that you've seen on your screen, basically the expected amount of damage goes down. This tick of poison going to do significantly more than that highly critical Mortal Spin, and we're kind of in a similar situation to last game. One thing to keep in mind that's different, on Demitrios' side of the field, is we have Amoonguss here, who is still basically fully healthy, and maybe could help stall out that Tailwind. He can afford to give up some Pokemon, probably, just really doesn't want to allow the combo of those Pokemon to be on the field with any potential Iron Bundle in the back and a speed advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if Glamora does the switch out into Tatsugiri once again, Amoonguss probably has a pretty comfortable way to click Spore into Dondozo. So if you switch in the Tatsugiri, you're not going to get that Earthquake damage on that first turn like you did last time. You may just have to go for something like a Protect, or, maybe just play it a little bit safer as well. I think it becomes a little bit tougher, though, just because it gets funky.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Terra Grass on Dondozo very likely to be relevant to this matchup.
Yes, that actually would be a perfect timing for it.
I think that's probably the reason we didn't see Amoonguss in Game 1. We'll see if we see it here, but Amoonguss getting out, making sure that it will be able to set up that, remove the Toxic Spikes once it's ready.
Yeah, remove those Toxic Spikes, maybe even bait out something like the Terastallization, and then you have a Terra flying on your side and go for a Terra Blast into the Dondozo, especially since we didn't see a switch into the Tatsugiri. That could be a really big play and a big read. But yeah, that Terra Grass from the Dondozo will stop any sort of shenanigans from the Amoonguss on the opposite side, but it's not going to help at the moment as Amoonguss has taken away from the field to allow for that Flutter Mane to come in. Is going to at least be looking like another Terastallization here. I wonder if that's the call.
Yeah, you may have called it exactly. This is a very bold play if he's able to survive this turn and get off a big Terra Blast, but we may see a little more interesting way of dealing with Dondozo than in Game 1.
I mean, listen, the fact that Tatsugiri's not in the match right now is huge. Power Gem from the Glamora going into that Flutter Mane does just under half of that damage. Dondozo going for the Wave Crash, getting away from the typing there of Tyranitar, really huge. Does take a little bit of recoil as well. Terra Blast from the Tyranitar, though, is going to be able to do some big, super effective damage onto this Dondozo, who is not boosted. It's not enough for the knockup, but that already hurts.
Yeah, it's a hungry Dondozo. There is no Tatsugiri in the field to help boost its stats, so that's a lot of easy damage. And, this Dondozo, unlike a lot of the Dondozo that we see, doesn't have any way to restore its HP other than that Leftovers Held item, which is being mostly negated for now by the Sandstream ability of Tyranitar. So this Dondozo's in a tough spot. It's going to have a hard way meaningfully regenerating its health.
Demitrios is making absolutely huge calls in this game, and it's definitely paying off. Already knowing probably what Marcus's game plan was and knowing that Marcus may just follow it exactly the same way they did Game 1.
Yeah, now it's an awkward spot too, right? Where how do you avoid getting your Dondozo knocked out easily here? I mean, maybe you just go go for a protect and kind of stall things out a little bit, but it's awkward. Earthquake can't knock out both these Pokemon because one of them is in the air, so the switch in Tatsugiri play here isn't like super viable, since one of the two Pokemon would likely be able to finish Dondozo off if you tried that one.
Yeah, and I mean at that point too, Demitrios has a really comfortable switch into Amoonguss at any point. He could switch it in for that Flutter Mane, preserve the Flutter Mane in the back, especially for when Tailwind expires, and maybe try and get that knockout, and then you also don't have to deal with any sort of toxic debris shenanigans. Flutter Mane though is switching out, bringing in that Amoonguss, will get rid of that toxic spikes, would take something like a Wave Crash much more comfortably as well. Even an Earthquake I think would handle, but Dondozo just protecting this turn, not trying to get knocked out before its buddy Tatsugiri can come and give it a hand. Glimmor's Power Gem will be doing damage into the Tyranitar, now super effective, and you do take that knockout. Does mean that Demitrios is going to have to either bring that Flutter Mane back in or whatever he has in the back.
Yeah, it's a little bit better spot now for Marcus. This game is far from over, and it's an important knockout to at least avoid having Tyranitar continuing to threaten this Dondozo, and also potentially relevantly, you avoid having to worry about it switching in and out and resetting the Sandstream. It's hard to imagine it being a huge difference, but at least if you want to dream of someday actually getting some recovery from those leftovers, you need this ability to go away.
Yeah, and I mean the fact of the matter is that Amoonguss too can still switch out, can still get Regenerator opportunities. Iron Bundle coming in later in the game than we saw it last time. It does not have the opportunity to go for something like a Terastallization though, but it's not terribly worried, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the Terastallization could have gone better in game one either way, but I think this is exactly the adjustment we wanted to see from Demitrios, right? Amoonguss has dealt with the entry hazard, Iron Bundle out, no Tailwind to worry about. Sort of an interesting read now, or like, do you go with the Ice-type attack on Dondozo, or maybe a Water-type attack on the Glimmora, like anticipating something, some shenanigans on the other side of the field. But this is a pretty powerful pin. It's going to be really tough for Marcus to get out of this one.
Yeah, I think if you double into the Dondozo, things get a little bit nicer, because you know that Tatsugiri's Choice Scarf, it's not something like Focus Sash. Glimmora running the Assault Vest as well. You have a big special attacker in both of the Pokemon of the Flutter Mane and the Iron Bundle, so it's probably going to take a couple of hits, even if they are super effective damage. Glimmora switching out here though. It is Tatsugiri's time to shine once more. Going to try and get those boosts, maybe try and keep its partner Pokemon Dondozo on the field for just a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's all you can do, right? Like, if you lose the Dondozo here for nothing, you're in deep trouble. So Dondozo going to boost its stats, see if it can try to pull out a miracle for Marcus.
Hey, I'm sure Marcus is really crossing his fingers right now, especially based on how game one ended up being in the end. Dondozo was in such a perfect position before. Iron Bundle protecting this turn means you're not going to be getting any damage on it, and it can still work to time out some Trick Room. Tailwind, I mean, Dondozo's Earthquake, not going to hit into that Iron Bundle, but will still hit into this Amoonguss, and you do have all of these boosts now, but Amoonguss is still very bulky. It's not a weak Pokemon by any means. Spore, because of the Terra Grass, not going to happen, but it also targeted into what was that Glimmora.
Yeah, I mean, no real cost on Demitrios' side of the field. Like, Amoonguss' HP not, like, super valuable for this endgame. And the Grass-type Dondozo is sort of the one scenario where Leaf Storm on Amoonguss doesn't matter all that much. It's not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage here, although, it's weakened enough that even maybe a little poke could make a difference. But you see Amoonguss also restoring its health to Citrus Berry. But what really matters here is just trying to get the situation like we talked about in the first game, where there's no Tailwind, there's a pin from Iron Bundle on Dondozo, and we do see, this time Iron Bundle's Protect going just right, the Tailwind going down, and now it will be quicker than the Dondozo, even after the boost from Commander.
Yeah, I mean, you could just get like an Icy Wind off and you get that knockout, and then Tatsugiri's forced out already. And then Tatsugiri is going to have to try and make a miracle happen with some Muddy Water connects. That Freeze Dry, though, was the move of choice here. Also makes plenty of sense. Fully accurate. You're not going to miss that sort of move. Amoonguss' Spore, once again, targeting down into that, assuming for a knockout, plus Tatsugiri getting put on the field. Tatsugiri also is not running Sleep Talk, which we've seen taken a lot for this exact scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you see why here too, right? I mean, it's a pretty tough spot for that Tatsugiri. It's going to be looking a little scared if it's inside Dondozo. The Ice-type attack probably knocking at Dondozo here, and then a Spore looking like it's going to be coming for Tatsugiri.
Yeah, exactly. That Freeze Dry does knock out this Dondozo. Was not able to put on as much pressure as it did in that last game. Is going to mean that this Tatsugiri has to come out here and be as brave as it can, but Spore meaning it's going to get put to sleep first and foremost. Glimmora will have to come back out from the back as well to try and help Marcus out, but it is slower than that Iron Bundle.
Yeah, I mean, it is potentially threatening a bunch of damage. And, you know, it is weak against the water type attacks. You know, Hydro Pump, not one of the most reliable moves in the game, but Marcus seeing the writing on the wall in this one, it looks like.
Yeah, Marcus clicking that forfeit here. Definitely a tough way to go out. Lots of commiserations, but well played by both of these trainers, showing off the aspects of both of their teams that make them so strong and showed how they got to this position here in day 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, both players, I think, come out looking pretty good in that set. You know, Marcus is a very tough way to lose that game 1. I think his game plan there was really good. And I think on the other side, you know, Demitrios adjusted that game 1 really well, right? I realized that if he played the game exactly the same way, it was likely not to be a win for him. And I think his adjustments were basically perfect, right? I think it was a really clever way of just slightly changing the game state, right? Because it was close in that first game. I think, you know, other than the first turn kind of just setting up the remaining tailwind turns in a way where Demitrios kind of didn't really have a shot unless something weird happened, you know, it was just a turn away from going the other way, and he did a really good job of managing his resources.
Yeah, and I think even the adjustment from game 1 to game 2 would have been an adjustment he could have made if he lost game 1 and then put Marcus on the back foot for game 3. So I definitely think that he had that game plan from learning from game 1, and that's truly the upside of best of 3 is you get to take the time to learn and say, okay, this is how my opponent would like to run this. This is their flow chart against my team, and clearly Marcus had executed it to the best of their ability there, whereas, you know, maybe it ended up not being the same in game 2. But I liked the adjustments. I liked the Tyranitar Terra into the flying type, I think put a lot of pressure on. I thought it was just such a cool call to go for the Terra Blast into the Dondozo and not try and have that Amoonguss going for something like a Spore. I thought it was some really neat heads-up plays, and also I think the aggressiveness that you need when you're in this part of the tournament.
Yeah, I thought it was really bold in a fun way. I mean, I think on Marcus' side of the field, if you look at game 2, right? I mean, like he plays it well. I don't think that was like a tilt loss.
Yeah.
Look at Demitrios' side. Yeah, I'd be a little curious if he would be equally bold if he was down 0-1 instead of up 0 or 1-0. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously the right play because it really paid off there. And yeah, I mean, you know, both players showing why they got here, right? I think there's some clever moves on both sides. I think you know, this Dondozo team, it's not so easy to play as maybe as it was in Series 1 for some players, right? Where you know, the margin for error is really thin there, and you see how Marcus got so deep using this team.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see as well. Dondozo have so much effect. We never saw Palmon on stream for any of the 2 matches that Marcus was on stream for, unfortunately, because I think Palmon's super fun. But you could see why I probably wouldn't have wanted to come to this matchup, and I think that it's still, I think it still puts on a lot of pressure. But I think both teams are really neat here. I love the Glamora Dondozo. We've seen that a lot recently, especially from Yuki when he ran that back in OCIC, and it's a really nice tech because if you can let Dondozo sit on the field and consistently do damage on the opposite side, Dondozo doesn't have to be the strongest, it just has to stay there the longest, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that in game 1, right, where you know, again, you know, imagining a different result perhaps with the ending, you know, it wouldn't have been able to just cleanly knock out the lead Pokemon if they weren't poisoned, if there wasn't that sand on the field, right? Where it just kind of did just enough with that Earthquake to get in a situation where it nearly did close out that game 1, where the extra damage mattered a lot, right? And I think even if you have maybe a more offensive Pokemon in that slot, instead just using a more conventional attack, may not have been enough, right? Like you would have needed something very specific to have the same amount of value that the Glamora did.
Yeah, and I think it ended up being a really huge player, right? And oftentimes when you see Pokemon like Iron Moth that comes out and sets up toxic spikes on turn 1, it's kind of those Pokemon that I mean, Glamora still hits like a tank. It's very much Nihilego based, in my opinion, when I think of it. I mean, same typing, same kind of fast special offensive output, but it does act in a very different way to Nihilego, you know? Nihilego is very much get your big damage off. You may not last on the field forever, but if you can take a couple of key knockouts like a Z move into Incineroar or something like that, then it's huge. And I think Glamora's function is far more tech based.
Yeah, I think especially the way people have chosen to use it, right? Where I was kind of expecting them to use it in a more similar way to, you know, its predecessor, and that's kind of what we saw at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah.
Especially a bunch of Japanese teams with Assault Vest, with choice specs, kind of just acting like a generic special attacker with weird typing, which I think that itself is a pretty good set, right? I mean, Terastallization really supports that, where you can shed some of the tough weaknesses if it wants to, but I think instead going for this, like, oh, well, there's nothing like it in the game playing the way that it's used on this team, and you really see the effectiveness, especially against a wide variety of opponents, where, you know, one of the drawbacks of the Dondozo teams is like you're often just like forced into using those other Pokemon, right? Where maybe you can't bring the pairing of those 2 Pokemon into a game, or like Palmont, you can't pick at a super high frequency, so you have to use Glamora a lot, and it's good against a wide variety of matchups because so few Pokemon are immune to poison. Yeah,
absolutely, right? I would love to get into the head, though, of Demitrios, and we have an interview ready with Gabby over in Bidoo's Hangout. Gabby, please take it away. Thank you so much, Maeve. Welcome back to the B-Doofs Hangout. I'm here with Demitrios, who just punched his ticket into Top Cut. So first of all, congratulations. I know that there was a lot riding on that matchup. How do you feel?
I feel great. Vancouver Regional, it's my hometown regional. I've done well here, but it's been a while since I've cut. It feels so good to make, especially in such a big tournament. It was a long weekend, but I'm really happy with how it's gone so far.
I know, this is the first time we've had this Day 2 Swiss tournament structure up here in the Pacific Northwest. Did you find that it was challenging to wake up this morning knowing that you had more rounds of Swiss to play, or was it more like motivation, like this is going to be my year, I'm going to do it?
Oh, it was very hard, especially with daylight savings overnight. Lost an hour of sleep, and was effectively waking up around 5:30 to go play Pokemon. I was like, is this even worth it? But it ended up working out, so I'm happy I woke up.
For sure. And I know that in that last matchup you were saying, Game 1, you did get a little lucky, especially with the muddy water miss. But Game 2 honestly felt pretty clean. It felt like you had your win conditions identified and you played to them pretty well. Did it feel like that from your perspective, or?
Yeah, Game 1, my lead was not great. He didn't lead exactly what I thought he would. So I was on the back foot from the beginning. He was able to get a tailwind up, which was really crucial. And in the moment, I completely forgot it was up, and I made some really bad plays. But thankfully, in the end, great Tusk bailed me out, got the crit, dodged the muddy water. It's my boy. And then after Game 1, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do to adapt to this. And led differently, played it cleanly, pinned him down, and yeah, worked out from there.
Yeah, it all works out. How did your other matches go today in Swiss?
They were pretty good. I lost to Gavin Michaels earlier. He kind of destroyed me. But other than that, pretty solid games. Played a couple of side spam. Played 3 Dondozo today, which is an okay matchup for me. Worked out. I was able to beat them. Yeah, it was a good day.
Did you have a specific game plan in mind for Dondozo with your team? Or, I mean, you say it's a pretty decent matchup, so I'm assuming you have, this is my Dondozo counter, this is how I play this.
Yeah, I have a general plan. Iron Bundle, super important with the freeze dry. And then if they're Terra Steel, I have Great Tusk to pin that as well. It gets tricky. Marcus had a Glamora on his team, which is very difficult for me to deal with. I didn't have a lot of good ways to hit it, especially with Terra Grasses. And then I have a Moongus if they're not substitute Dondozo, which he wasn't either. So yeah, it's a very playable matchup, but the Mons around the Dondozo affected a lot. So
yeah, and was that something that you prepared for this tournament? Because I know we were talking on stream about how yesterday Palafin was actually the one that popped up in our top 12 usage, but today it's Dondozo, and I feel like if I were prepping for a regional, I would be like, I need to know all my Dondozo matchups. But I'm curious how you approached prep for this regional.
To be honest, I only started playing this format about a week ago.
Oh, nice. Well, congratulations. You clearly have a mastery of
thank
it.
you. I've been playing for a long time, but I only started playing Scarlet and Violet recently. So in preparation, I kind of just played a lot of games. I just picked 6 Mons that I thought were solid, that I could play well. They're pretty standard, nothing crazy. And I just grind out my matchups. Honestly, my Palafin matchup, don't really like it, but thankfully I didn't run into it today. Dondozo, I played a lot. Felt pretty solid about, and I played that a lot today, so it worked out for me.
Yeah, well, if it's any help, the data supports your experience. So.
Yeah, that was all part of the plan.
Yeah, it was all part of the plan indeed. Do you have a plan going into top 8 at all, or are you just going to see how it goes?
I don't even know who's in top cut. Wasn't paying attention, so no idea. Just going to take it as it goes, keep playing my game, and yeah, hopefully I can keep going.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you got to play at the end of the day. Congratulations again on making Top Cut. Is there anybody at home you want to give a shout out to? Any thanks you want to give out?
Yeah, I'll give shout outs to my friends who came with me. It was their first tournament. They did really well, 6-3 yesterday. My friend Scott, everyone in the VGC Monastery, shout outs to you guys. You guys did really well as well. And yeah, thanks to everyone. Even my mom, who's always supporting me. I know you're watching. Thank you everyone so much.
There's been a lot of love for moms on this stream today, and I just got to say shout outs to all you moms out there. And again, if you are a mom and you missed this video live, you can catch the VOD, so you're covered.
Yep.
But seriously, thank you so much, Demitrios. Best of luck in Top Cut. You're going to do great, I'm sure.
Thank you